So, compañeros, welcome to another edition of the SQL Data Partners Podcast. So, you'll forgive us, but I am running a little behind today.
3 out of 10 might come back next week.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, so baby steps, right? We just have to keep going and keep trying some different things. So, it's good to have you back, Kevin. So the subject of today's event, or just the subject of today's session, is the elephant in the room, and I had to chuckle because we had a little feedback, and the question was, did something happen this week? So the big news this week is that something I think that's been percolating on the Twitterverse, at least for a little while, and I admit that I had to, a little bit like our recent politics, just had to tune it out a little bit. But lots of chatter about pass. So unfortunately, to our well, at least to my dismay, I won't speak for everyone, but to my dismay, we found out that pass is going to fold, and. While the writing may have been on the wall for a little bit, it is still sad to think that that organization won't be around. And so I guess maybe first, right, let's get hot takes from everybody, and then we'll.
Oh yes, recorded
we'll
hot takes. That sounds like a safe idea.
Well, you asked for hot takes. Let me give you some. Now, so first of all, I'll say, look, pass has been excellent. I understand there have been issues. I understand there's a lot of consternation. I do understand there have been a lot of problems. I appreciate the fact that pass had been there, or will have been there. Will have had been there.
Yeah, I think the pass pluperfect is the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, will have had been there. And I appreciate everything that anybody who's ever volunteered for pass, who's ever helped organize anything to do with this community. I appreciate all of the work that has gone into this over the decades. I don't think that any of us would be where we are today without pass. I think it would be a much worse place as a result. So fully appreciating all of the work that they've put in there. I will say, if you go over to the .NET side, there was an organization called INETA that was around for quite a while. It's the Independent .NET Association. I know the former president of the organization. He's local to the area. They folded as well. Organizations have lifetimes, and ideas live beyond organizations. So the fact that there is a SQL Server community, the fact that there is a broader data platform community, there will be organization. You know, there's a lot that has to be processed right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, give us a second, because there's a lot even just in thinking even that idea. So let's get Kevin or Eugene's take, and then we'll hop back into there.
Yeah, no, I'll try to get my lukewarm take in. No, I agree. Like, first, thank you to the current board members and previous board members and all the volunteers and everything. Yeah, I mean, I think the short version is, I think there was a lot of innovator's dilemma, a lot of who moved my cheese, and maybe even a certain bit of what you might term regulatory capture when it comes to the relationship between CNC and pass. And so you have this situation where you had this kind of monolithic structure that, when it was founded, was 100% necessary, right? And over those decades did tons and tons of good, and in a lot of ways struggled to be agile and nimble and keep up with the times. You know, I feel like what happened is we, you know, in .NET terms, we've been forcibly migrated from a monolith to microservices, and not all of us were ready for that. So it'll be interesting to see.
Well, so it's interesting that you say that, and to echo Kevin, right? I'm appreciative. So certainly, this stream would more than likely not be happening right now had it not been for pass and
Right.
connecting with others. Right now, Kevin potentially. I mean, well, so both Kevin and Eugene, you guys are within driving distance, and that's kind of how we, through SQL Saturdays, right, found each other. So it's not impossible that our paths would have crossed, but much more, much less.
Yeah, much less likely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so yeah, I'm super appreciative. Now we talk about the transition. There's been lots of discussion about this. I am curious, and maybe even jumping back into the .NET example that we have is, I still don't believe that people understand all the support that was given to them by having a larger organization, and that you think about, microservices, right? All I need is this little sliver.
Right.
There's still a lot of platform behind there that was available for you to be able to do that little thing. And I think so that there's no question, right, that the idea will live on. And it was funny. So just before we started taping, or start recording, we were talking about conferences, right? And Eugene and Kevin were given their like, oh hey, what are we gonna do and where are we gonna go? So just to use events as an example, if you thought it was difficult to secure speakers beforehand, just wait, right? Because now if you don't have that larger organization behind you, right? I think it's going to be, which could be good or bad, right? It's going to be harder to secure speakers. However, the concept of maybe the grassroots community could potentially be strengthened if you have good leadership there.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and certainly people are working on replacements for some of that infrastructure, some of those things. But yeah, I think we're all gonna be cautiously watching and seeing what pieces get replaced, and some pieces are irreplaceable, but I mean every type of organization has a failure mode, right? Just in the sense that there's a lot of benefits that come with centralization and there's a lot of downsides. I mean, that's the thing, is like when you have this big Titanic ship, you can fit a lot of people on board and you can, move a lot of people, but avoiding that iceberg becomes more difficult. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess so jumping back into the conversation like with the .NET group, right? So do you, because admittedly I don't know what that community looks like necessarily. So maybe give us the lay of the land, Kevin. Can you explain a little bit about what it kind of looks like now?
Yeah. So let me first off indicate that there have been .NET organizations. There obviously are still .NET user groups around. There are plenty of them. Ineta was special in the way that PASS was special, in that neither of them was directly owned by a parent organization, in the sense of like
this
Oracle
is not the marketing arm of this company, right?
Exactly. That the Oracle user groups are actually really owned by Oracle, and they are the biggest financier. They're basically the major financier. The Hadoop conferences, typically have been hosted or organized by the major vendors. So it wasn't a vendor-driven organization. Microsoft had board seats. Microsoft played a significant role in this. But the idea was that at the end of the day, it wasn't strictly Microsoft. It wasn't them saying do X. It was organized in a more spontaneous fashion. Similarly with Ineta, the independent was the driving word there.
Right.
After they ended, essentially it was, okay, we don't have the funding to continue on, but all of the organization work that has happened at the local levels, that still goes on. There are still user groups. There are still code camps. Code camps are probably bigger than they were back in the early 20 teens when Ineta was still around. So the fact that you have these local conferences, these local events, it's a good thing. It's an indicator of the long-term success of the idea. And same thing will happen with the data platform space. There will still be conferences. I hope that there will be something that will be convenient for organizers, for speakers, for sponsors, for attendees to know that there is this conference that's not right in my area, but is 60, 70, 80 miles away. So I hope that there are those organizational aspects put into place, because as much as all of us have complained about the SQL Saturday website over the years, the many, many, many problems with it, it's still at the very least told you that here are events that are going on all across the world that are going to be apropos to your interests.
Right.
And that I could just go there and say, oh, you know what? I've never been to Manchester, England before. Let me apply to speak at their event. And otherwise, I might have known about it, but there's no guarantee that I would know about it. And I know that there are websites that people try to keep track of different conferences, and some of those do a better job than others. But there's a lot of conferences that fall through the cracks.
Sure.
And I think that's hopefully an area where there will be a bit more deliberation and a bit more capacity to pull together as we talk about essentially a set of separate organizations living on.
And that's a great example, at least in my mind, of one of the things that we're going to lose, and I don't feel like it's going to be easily replaced, because sure, right, New England, right, or New Mexico, right, may want to do their events, but the idea of having something that's going to encompass, even the United States, right, would be hard enough, let alone Manchester, England or Australia, right, things like that. And it's surprising. I continue to be baffled by the amount of personal investment that people will make in traveling, right, to other countries to speak at events and whatnot.
If the IRS is listening, all of that travel is strictly for business, and I had no pleasure at all in any of the travel.
Right?
Strictly business.
That Victory burrito, strictly business, right?
Obviously that was a food expense.
The time you flew a drone with SQL and just took pictures of the landscape. I'm sure you used those photos for website backgrounds and stuff. And
I actually have, yes. I wish that I had written that off as a business expense. I did not have the chutzpah to do so.
Oh man, no, you got to be like my uncle. Like he makes like $100 a month in stock photography, and so it's like, oh yeah, no, I went to this NASCAR race and I was taking pictures. So really, it was a business expense.
Yeah.
It's legit.
Yeah.
So,
a lawyer.
Question: a lot of us love the community, right? And Kevin, I'm going to give you kudos here. One of the ways that, and it felt a little bit desperate. I'll just say that word at the time, but Pass had initiated this Pro Pass, right, as a way of trying to generate additional revenue.
You mean the one that you bought us as thank yous?
Yeah. So as I was thinking about it, right, I'm like, okay, whatever qualms I have about Pass, at the end of the day, I wanted to see it succeed. I wanted to see it stick around. And I'm like, okay, I don't know that so my personal opinion was I could not justify the summit expense, right? Having put on virtual events, I was just like, that event doesn't sound right to me. So I don't know that I can necessarily, support that at the price that they were looking to be supported. But they gave me this other option, right, with the Pro Pass. And so we had just had our event, SQL Trail, and I thought, why don't we do as a kind of a odd, or I don't know, different, but also supporting or recognizing that Pass had brought a lot of us together. I would offer pro passes to all the folks that spoke at our SQL Trail event. And Eugene, right? So I sent out the email and said, hey guys, right, I'd love to do this for you as a thank you. And Kevin's like, I already have a pro pass. Thanks anyway. So question, right? Now we're looking back here, and I don't mean to throw stones.
Sure.
But admittedly, the question kind of feels like I'm throwing stones. Could Pass have kept going if more people had said, you know what, I'd like to see Pass go and buy a pro pass?
Like maybe, a couple 100,000. Yeah. So basically.
So 100,000 you think was the number?
I forget. We're talking like low millions of dollars, right? Mm-hmm. Like they needed to make at least $1.5 million more than they did from Summit and all the other revenue sources, right?
Yep. 1.6 million. So Tim Ford had these numbers in the final board notes. Those were released, I think, yesterday.
Yeah.
But basically, they brought in just shy of $2 million for Virtual Summit, and they needed $3.6 million for it. With the shortfall and nothing else forthcoming, even if all other revenue was achieved, which includes Pass Pro membership and includes all the sponsorship and such, they'd have a deficit of up to about $3 million.
Also, Alan has been kind enough to point out that I am bad at math, and that 100,000 Pro Pass subscriptions at $120 each is $12 million. So really, they only needed like, I guess 20,000, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what is going on with my chat today, but I cannot see it.
This is in the Twitch chat, to be clear. Yeah. Well, shout out to
popped out for a second and then it went away, so I'm not seeing it. So you'll.
Oh, not Alan. Oh my God. Sorry.
Alan is here.
Andy Levy has been the most active individual. So he corrected us on math, and then he.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Andy. And then he also said that it was super convenient having that SQL Saturday website and being able to find speakers and point people to it and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, okay. So better answer is probably like what 20,000 subscriptions or something could have potentially saved passes and organization.
So 20,000. Okay, so 20,000 subscriptions. So when you think about that's everybody. So a normal summit is 5,000 people.
Yeah, you would need 4x.
So you need 4x that number. Okay. So the short answer is that was probably a bit of a stretch. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Virtual Summit had been a blockbuster hit and you had gotten really good uptake with Pass Pro, I think it would have been possible. The truth of the matter is that I think at this point, like, we all had Zoom fatigue. I
agree. I mean,
it's just hard to have a conference of that scope and cost at the end of 9 months of a pandemic, 10 months of a pandemic, and be successful. So yeah, it was really an uphill battle for them.
Yeah. So do we know the number? So Andy asks, how many active members did Pass really have?
So I think 1,000 people voted in the board.
Okay.
It was around 1,000. So we're talking.
1,000 votes cast.
Yeah, it was definitely hundreds. So close to 1,000. So I mean, my expectation would be that, you had 1,000 kind of active members, and maybe 2,000 people that would be qualified as semi-active, right? So yeah, no, it's a hard lift, and especially because I've got a conflict of interest because I'm a Pluralsight author, and certainly part of me wants you to spend $300 on Pluralsight instead of $120 on Pass, so I can get some of that sweet Power BI money.
Sure.
Yeah. So it was a difficult situation.
Oh, so we can blame Eugene. So this is the real reason. We're like
the whole time I was tweeting don't buy Pass Pro. Here's my affiliate code for Pluralsight.
So as far as numbers go, the problem is that Eugene gave one way of backing into it. That's voters. I would say there's probably closer to an order of magnitude more relatively active users than voters.
Sure.
Usually you get like 1% of an online population to vote on things like board membership. And that's fairly common. Active membership, I don't know. If I were to say that it was in the 7 to 12,000 range, I don't think I would blush too hard. But that is by active membership in scare quotes. What I'm saying here is you were generally going to user group meetings, or you were regularly watching virtual chapters or something along those lines. You were engaging in the community at that level. So a lot of those people who may have been going to the user group meetings don't necessarily consider themselves past members. You went to a SQL Saturday, and you would go to a SQL Saturday again even, or you would even go to user group meetings. But the feeling of, well, am I really involved with past at that point? It's a little tenable.
Right.
And if you include those people, yeah, you could tell me 12,000 people, and I don't think I would bat an eye. If you include only people who are actively organized with the central pass organization, yeah, I think Eugene's much closer to reality with 1 to 2,000.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the reason Carlos asked was in part. Oh wait, no, was it Carlos or Andy?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, it's Andy.
Andy,
Okay.
yeah. So my question was, could Pass Pro have saved us? And
Right,
basically, should we be chiding ourselves to be like, hey, if you were kind of on the fence, right? And
No.
for the 100 or whatever bucks it was, right? Could we have made a, again, from a community perspective, could we have made a difference there? And it sounds
I
like
think-
the math
I think Kevin's right on the numbers in terms of people who are just on a broad basis engaged. I think part of the reason why I went with a very conservative number is like we're trying to figure out like how many people was as the cool kids say, the total addressable market of Pass Pro licenses. And I feel like 1,000's a lot more closer to like, okay, if it was just knock it out of the park, super amazing. Like if Bob Ward did 50 courses for them, here's what we'd be looking at. But yeah, no, I mean, COVID is an existential crisis for a lot of businesses,
Sure.
unfortunately. And I think, a common refrain is that COVID exposed a lot of organizational frailties that were already there, and we're gonna probably continue to get worse over the next 5 to 10 years, right? And certainly, like as a scheduler, we were working against those as best we could in certain ways. We were trying to diversify the content, all that kind of stuff. But there's that meme that who in your organization is driving digital transformation? Is the CIO, the CFO, the CEO, and then like answer D is COVID, and it's in
You're right.
big red circles. And that's the truth. Is that COVID. I think COVID in a lot of ways has moved a number of organizations 5 to 10 years ahead.
Faster,
Now,
right?
Yeah. Now
They didn't have it. They had to put it in. Yep.
Yeah, and so if you're Amazon, this is great.
No,
If you're the last horse and whip buggy, or buggy horse whip factory, this is not great because it moved you along to your terminal point.
Sure.
And I think in a lot of ways it moved past along to its terminal point that we were coming to.
Yeah, and also I will. I jumped in and said no very quickly, and I will forcefully say no. It's not incumbent upon the members of the community to keep an organization alive.
Right.
But even if the benefit, again, we just talked about all of the structure that is in place that we enjoy, right? That we like. Is that don't we have some responsibility to at least?
The short answer, again, I'll say no, and the reason is that there has to be an analysis, the cost benefit analysis here
Right.
of if you say go buy this membership and there is an X probability chance that it will lead to solvency. I have to be willing to take that difference into account that, well, I'm moving the needle from 0% to 0.0001%.
Right.
And then if 10,000 more people follow me, then we'll get to 100%. So there's that, which is going to be a difficult hurdle. But, from the perspective of a person in the community, look, you're saying essentially give this organization $100 to get the intangible value, because frankly, the membership itself wasn't really worth money. It wasn't really worth much. It was essentially, if you were willing to pay for it. The whole reason I paid for it was, okay, I want to try to keep this organization going.
Yeah, but that's the point that I'm making, right? Is that
I think
it felt like, hey, we want to keep this thing going, right?
So I think part of I think a term that I'm sure Kevin would love to use and is just failing to think of is the term moral hazard, right? Because the thing is, if an organization isn't able to stay agile, isn't able to justify its existence, isn't able to persuade community members that it should exist, but then it still comes around, it's like, well, you owe us. You run into the risk of moral hazard, and certainly that was something that happened with Pass, where over time it became very much its primary focus was running Summit.
Sure.
To pay for its primary focus, which was running Summit, and a lot of the secondary stuff got smaller and smaller. And again, we started at the top of this, that we're super grateful, but I think you have a moral obligation to consider supporting an organization that you want to support. But I think ultimately any organization needs to stand on its own merits and to justify its existence.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Pass at this point, it collapsed, it folded because it couldn't stand on its own merits any longer. It had taken on too many liabilities and just too many barnacles on the hull, switching metaphors.
Yeah, well, I mean, so you think about it, like, you can imagine how this could have gone differently in a different world, right? Like, some people got super pissed when they got rid of breakfast, kind of without much warning. But you can imagine a situation where, there wasn't as much inertia, and, maybe someone had a Cassandra complex a decade ago and saw, like, we developed time travel. We sent someone back to warn them about, instead of like the Terminator future, it's, hey guys, COVID's going to happen. We're not going to tell you about that because we can't change too much of the future, but we're going to put somebody on the board or whatever. You can imagine a situation where, a lot of different steps could have been taken. You could have reduced the overall liabilities of the organization. You could have reduced the organizational inertia. You could have broadened the vendor base, broadened the volunteer base, all that kind of stuff, because there was a point in time where Pass was able to handle an existential crisis. We'd had a hurricane in the past, or, there was 9/11, and so there was insurance to handle this stuff. There was enough of a budget surplus to handle this kind of stuff. So, I think it's one of those things where every little step of the way either made sense at the time, or it was aligned with those kind of that local maxima of incentives. And not all those incentives are great, but I think really what happened, again, to channel my inner Kevin Fiesel, this was the hill climbing problem. This was the kind of optimization problem where we found a local maxima, and it was great and it was improving until it wasn't, and it wasn't the global maxima. It wasn't the global ideal.
So do you think that another, I'll call it issue, right? Problem, and I will point to, I'll use myself as an example. We've used Eugene. So did Pass
die because of SQL Trail and the intense competition that it provides?
No. But
go ahead. I'm just teasing.
But I guess to that point, so did it? Because at least I've said, right, we wouldn't be streaming, right, if it wasn't for Pass.
Sure.
Now, I started the podcast, right? I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? There's no question that, anyway.
Sure.
I'm not sure that I have all those thoughts completely, ironed out just yet. But because people have been able to, I'll say, I don't know if copy is the right word, right? But they have definitely gotten the experience and been able to get close enough to see how the sausage gets made. And they're like, well, I can make my sausage.
Sure.
Right? That's ultimately, I don't want to say.
No. So, I mean, I think it's a lot of it's pretty simple, honestly. So I think a lot of what happened was a combination of, one, you had this explosion in video content that really added a lot of competition. Tons of free stuff on YouTube, and then if you want to pay for Lynda Learning, Pluralsight, whatever, huge amount of content available for an affordable price. You had the growth of the internet, and so suddenly going to a physical place and meeting in person had less need and less value. I mean, we still all enjoyed it. Everybody loves going to the crab pot, but you had that, and then I think a big part of the problem is that you had a ratcheting effect within the organization and CNC of costs, right? And so you had decreasing profits due to increased competition and lowered relative value, but you didn't have a good mechanism for lowering costs.
Sure.
And again, what that usually came out as is like, okay, well, we cut breakfast, or we're cutting support for SQL Saturdays or whatever. You cut around the edges.
But it's you get too little too late in a sense, right?
I mean, yeah, and it's just, and you read the minute notes, and I mean, it sounds like, some of the liabilities of the fact that they negotiate these multi-year contracts with the convention center and the hotels and all this kind of stuff. And like, that's great. And I appreciate them trying to like save money, but then you end up with this multi-year liability, and you have a COVID and you're not able to adjust. Right. And so I think really it's as simple as that. I don't think it's anyone, like, I don't think any particular conference was the death knell for Pass, right? Like, especially because, I think in the U.S. it was in very ways supreme, and also it had a very good relationship with Microsoft, and so was able to benefit from that in terms of, the keynote and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's simple. It's the market was shrinking, the core market was shrinking, and we were trying to address that by broadening the content that we had. Revenue was shrinking, but costs had a way of continually going up. And some of that, like I said, was maybe some of that regulatory capture. I think speaking as a consultant, if I had a single client, that makes things weird and creates kind of this enmeshment that can be dangerous, sure. Right? Normally as a consultant, the danger is on me because the company is big enough they can just drop me anytime. But when you only have a single vendor, you run into the same problem. Like, imagine, completely hypothetically, we found out that CNC was running a meth lab. They got busted by the Mounties, and it was gone, right? That would provide a existential crisis for Pass, all the same. And so I think, it's natural that whenever you have a single vendor, there's this natural inclination towards a ratcheting of costs. I think it just happens. But then also, again, you run this problem of like, okay, I know there were many efforts to diversify their income, and some of this came too little too late with Pass Pro. I know Jen Stirrup did a lot of work. They tried to do that business analytics summit. I want to be clear. They tried. But you run into this issue where if we weren't able to send that time traveler 10 years ago and fix the issue, you run into this issue where you end up with your primary source of income, like not like, what was it, like 90% of their income? I forget.
Yeah, something like that.
It was huge. At least 80. It was huge.
Yeah.
So like 90% of your income comes from an event that's extremely expensive to run. And you just get into this problem that like, okay, we have to spend millions of dollars to put on an event that produces 90% of our income. Like I have so much sympathy and empathy for all of the board members of the past decade, because it's just this Kobayashi Maru, like, no-win scenario. So it's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm going to have a chain of things that may or may not. So first on the major event thing, one thing to remember is, I'm sure there's somebody screaming about it at their monitor right now. PASS also ran a deficit last year. This, from my recollection, there was a deficit last year, and they had to make cuts as a result. So, yeah, COVID accelerated and exacerbated the issue. I think that it still would have run its course in time. And this is, like Eugene was saying, this is not the fault of a person. This is not some bad actor or some person making terrible decisions. I think these are rational people making rational decisions given the options and information available to them at the time. It's just organizations fail. And, going back to my comment about, no, I don't think we are obligated to prop up an organization beyond its useful lifetime. Ideas we want to prop up, ideas we want to keep, and organizations, to the extent that they further those ideas, are useful and they are good. Those two things being separate, by the way. But just because the organization dissolves doesn't mean the core ideas go away. The fact that, yes, we have gotten more savvy about delivering content, about being capable of helping people learn, that mission of learning, I think it's a good thing. I don't think it was a direct competition to PASS. I think that there's enough, say, demand for content that we weren't starving out PASS. People at the margins might have said, yeah, I won't go to PASS Summit because I could go to SQL Saturdays, or I could go to user group meetings, or I could watch it all online and get basically the same content. There are people who thought that way, I'm sure. Especially people who had a really tough time getting a company to pay for this training. Sure. But I don't believe that was enough of a percentage to really alter the results.
Move the needle.
I think it's essentially, like Eugene was saying, look, over time you build up these liabilities. Over time you build up these expectations, and it's hard to change as circumstances demand it.
Right.
We saw them, well, let's try to save costs by moving out of Seattle. And they tried to do things to reduce those costs. But when you're at a point where now we can't meet in person, every online conference got hit. They all got hammered because the online experience isn't as good as the in-person experience.
Right.
So I think those were all of my thoughts, but I probably lost a couple in transit.
Okay, well, I appreciate the conversation, right? I think, one of the sad things, perhaps, is that there was a lot of, so people get emotional, right, about it, right? And they have, and so that can be good, or sometimes it can not be so good. And so I felt a little confused. And so I appreciate kind of working through some of these ideas with you. And I think we're sad to see it go. So now having said that, right? So what are the ideas? What are the what are the major ideas that we can take and that we should continue to run with?
Yep, I'll start with that since I keep talking about ideas.
Here we go.
So look, one of them is your user groups are not going away. The user groups are all separate from PASS. PASS was essentially an umbrella organization that affiliated with all of these local user groups, and that was a good thing. If they were all owned by PASS, then PASS dissolving would be a serious impediment. But, for example, my group, the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group, we're incorporated separately. We are an independent organization. If PASS dissolves, essentially what that means for us is nothing. So those local groups will still continue. We'll still have a need for speakers. We'll still have a desire to help people learn. We'll still have people looking to learn. I think that some people came to the user groups via PASS, But at this point, frankly, I think Meetup's more critical for user groups than an umbrella organization like Pass. We now have a better way of saying, hey, here are groups you might be interested in, without having somebody need to know about the parent organization. Going back to the Ineta example, again, they helped drive all of this content to local user groups. They helped set up chapters. Pass helped set up chapters across the world, and they are now there. These groups are now there. We have quite a few people who have experience setting up groups, who have experience starting out things, and can help people coming in. It may be a little bit harder, but I think that's still a viable concept. The idea of this passion to learn, this desire to teach, this end goal of improving your professional skills, all of these things are still relevant concepts. And all of the people who were interested in this are still capable of doing these things. In the short run, it may be harder. In the medium run, we may have lost something. In the long run, though, the idea lives on. One other thing I do want to mention, though, is that a short-term difficulty is a lot of the Pass user groups have been availing themselves of Pass software, like GoToWebinar licenses. Same thing with virtual chapters. These are probably the biggest short-term difficulty. How do we get those user groups to be able to broadcast something, until people can meet in person again? How do we get that in a way that you don't have to pay out as a user group leader? We don't make money from this anyhow, so paying money into it kind of sucks. Like I foot the cost for Meetup and for some of the stuff. Right. And actually now that TriPass is incorporated, I don't have to do that. The kitty there can do it. But for a lot of user groups that are just essentially one-person shows, you've got to pay that $80 every 6 months for Meetup. You have to pay for GoToWebinar. That's a little expensive. Yeah. And I think that there are different techniques, like sharing information on how do we get this out. I had a blog post a while back on running a user group on Twitch, and that's what we do. I broadcast on Twitch. We stream via Whereby, so that's the conferencing software that I use, which is free. It's not without its hiccups, but kind of does the job. Teams is still free for certain groups at certain times. There are options, and it'll be around, like, trying to help people get those options together.
Sure. So I have another thought, but before we do that, so Andy has a question. Have any of your people reached out to you asking what's next? I think we're probably a little too early for that, just because the email, at least I got the email yesterday. I feel like it will take a month or two for the normal Joe, right, who comes to the user groups to kind of figure out.
Yeah, people are thinking about Christmas. Like, a lot of people don't even know. And I like our Power BI user group, which is run through a separate for-profit entity. That's been on pause since COVID started. Like, we've had like one or two meetings, so I think there's a lot of user groups where they're in hibernation right now, honestly.
Yeah. For my group, I was a little proactive. I sent out an email last night basically saying, hey, here's the current information that we have, and that TriPass is going to go on, that we are a separate institution. So we're here. We're going to continue on doing our thing. One of the issues is we don't exactly know what's going to shake out until the lawyers are done with this. All we know is Pass has a dissolution date of January 15th. What's going to happen to those properties? Will they be sold off? Will there be anything that's able to be given away to the community? That's all something the lawyers are going to have to deal with. Sure. So there are a lot of open questions at this point that none of us can really answer, but those answers will come out in time.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting. And so I think, to Kevin's point about, needing resources, I'm not sure how many folks are in that position of organizing a group, right? So I'm happy to help if I can, right? So I have a Zoom account, right? It's unlimited time width. I'm not a big fan of the GoToWebinar. That's just me, kind of more who I am. I like a little more interactivity than stare at this screen. And so if there's a user group out there, I know I'll reach out to Jamie and Wayne here locally. But if there are other groups that need a Zoom meeting for a little while, I'd be happy to make that available. So, okay. Well, let's see. Last thoughts. So ideas. So Kevin gave us a couple of ideas, right? So Eugene, maybe an idea that you think should survive, or that you'd be willing to support, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think some way of collaborating and coordinating local events. I think that's extremely important. And I'm especially biased because I live in the Northeast, so I can drive to multiple metropolises within easy range. And so, I really enjoyed doing the circuit tour of any city that was within 6 hours of here. So I do Cincinnati and Columbus and Cleveland and Pittsburgh and Richmond and Rochester and all that. And so I just really hope there's some way of, coordinating that, and it doesn't split out into data Rochester and data and AI Cleveland and Azure Columbus and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably, so unless they come up with some clarity fairly quickly in terms of what the next steps are, I think you will have people, right, particularly the ones who are used to trying to start. Well, again, we're not meeting in person, right? So I guess that might change things. But in terms of trying to do their virtual events in the spring, they're going to start making plans and creating names. And, if they're putting a lot of effort into it, they may not be so interested in trying to prop up another idea later.
Yeah, I suppose the one upside to this is that there probably is about a 6-month period where we can sit on our hands and wait because, well, we're not going to have physical events.
Right.
In the spring. Even if somebody puts it on, I think they'll be extremely limited. I know that, for example, there's an event that Riza Rad is putting on in New Zealand, but that's just for New Zealanders. It's a local event down there. They're all close from their island. Sure. So, an island I would love to visit someday, but there's a local event there. But most other places, we're not going to really have physical in-person events of any size for at least 6 months, maybe not until nearer to the end of 2021.
Yeah.
Given that it takes 3 to 6 months to plan one of these things, and most of the venues that we would be looking at, they're not even going to open up their doors to outsiders for at least 6 months plus. So you wouldn't even be able to book the venue, and I don't think you plan the event until you have a venue in mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. So I think, again, so getting back to community, right? I think, maybe your point was that the big event had maybe gotten a little too big.
Yeah.
And that probably needs to be rethought a little bit. I am curious to know, just because it is so difficult to keep the local meetings going, I kind of wonder if the model or moving to a less frequent but quote unquote larger event makes more sense. So instead of doing, again, it's not super difficult, but at least, I had to walk away from it because it's like, oh gosh, I got to get the speaker, and are they, I got to make sure the announcements and, all those things. I almost feel like, okay, well, what if I just had a quarterly event and we have, 2 tracks or something like that, right? With 4 speakers or something like that. So it's not, it's not a big event, but it's bigger than what we would normally have a group for. If that
some places do that. They'll have the quarterly meeting. Actually, for example, our Python user group in the area, they meet once a quarter, and they have 3 to 4 speakers. It's a 3-hour or so event. Generally gives speakers about 45 minutes for a main session, about 20 minutes for a shorter session. And that's a model that works. I've known other SQL Server groups that have had more of a quarterly model where you get 2 speakers, because you may not have a huge number of speakers in the area, and it may be difficult to get someone in. So you have 6 meetings a year instead of 12, or 3 meetings a year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it for today's episode, compañeros. So whether you come from a big metropolis or a small one, right? Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. You'll forgive us for not including some shout outs, but we'll just give a big shout out to everybody who has volunteered or participated in the past. And we look forward to seeing what happens. I think, don't be. At least my takeaway is be okay with not knowing just for a little bit longer, right? Until some of these things can get situated. I for one am still hoping that some of the larger organizations like a Microsoft can come up and be like, okay, well, hey, look, we're interested in doing X, right? I know there's been a big push or big change within the Power BI / Dynamics communities, right? So, maybe, do we try to get folded in with something like that, right? Who knows? Okay, so if folks want to reach out to us, maybe to yell at us or tell us, what great ideas we had, of course. How can they do that, Kevin?
Well, I was going to give you my pass.org email address, but I guess that's not going to
And here I thought that January 15th it would be made known, right? Like, oh, you check the website on January 16th, and that's what
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SQLgene and SQLgene.com.
And compañeros, I enjoy connecting with you on LinkedIn. If you do connect, let me know that you're listening to the podcast. We do appreciate it. And thanks again for tuning in to this episode. And I'll see you on the SQL Trail.